be, at some point, a question asked on this radio show that you are just dying to add to. And it's your voice I want to hear. So 515-244-0077. I'll say that slower. 515-244-0077. All right, Frank, the Verse Thomas, in today on a Friday. Bob Montserrat, the Cat in the Hat. Our expert, best producer in the world, Ryan, is producing. And our special guest today is my good friend and mentor, Pastor Rich. I guess we're not good friends, but we're friends. But you are still one of my mentors. Pastor Richard Webb from Lutheran Church of Hope. And the question today is, where is God in the midst of your suffering? Now, I know we're probably going to quote some biblical verses to tell us, because we go to the Bible for the truth. But I want to hear your stories. I want you to call in and say, let me tell you something. Man, my mom died, or I lost my job, or my husband left me, or we lost a pastor at our church, and our church began to fall apart. And I was suffering. I could not figure out why God was doing what he was doing. And then at some point down the line, that, 2020 vision is perfect when you look back. And you realize that God was in the midst of your suffering, because you know what suffering is? It's grace. It's glorifying you. It's worship, or glorifying God. It's worshiping him. Because during that time, you have a tendency, I know I do, to dig a little deeper into my faith and to call out to God. Maybe have an argument with God and say, why? Why me? We'll just nickname you Job and you'll understand. So that's the call. That's the question. That's the show. We appreciate you listening. So, Pastor Richard, how are you today?
Doing good. How you doing?
Good. Nice to have you here.
Good to be here.
We were telling jokes before the radio show started, and I found out one good thing. There's a joke I can't tell on the radio. Now, that makes you and Chris both telling me I can't say this. As soon as somebody says I can tell it, I'm going to tell it.
Uh-oh, we're in trouble now.
But I won't do it while you're here.
Okay, I feel better now.
Yeah, because the opinions expressed on this radio show are not that of Richard Webb, Frank Verse Thomas, Bob Montserrat. Actually, they're all Chris Roloff's opinions. I have a script here that I read. I'm reading from a script that Chris Roloff, the best station manager in the whole world that I've ever worked with in my whole entire life, and blessed by God with great amounts of talent and skill, said I could say this. All right, so you get it all the time, right? Mm-hmm. People coming to you and horrible situations. Mm-hmm. And, I'm going to jump to a bad one. Mm-hmm. Why did my baby have to die?
Man, those are the toughest ones, too, whether they're stillborns or miscarriages or tragedies like sudden infant death syndrome. All those things just break hearts. I would add to that chronic suffering is also one that's a baffler. Those are sort of the two that when people give easy answers, they just ought not to.
Okay, now I'm going to be a devil's advocate for a second.
You betcha.
Isn't chronic suffering brought on by me?
Absolutely not. What about someone who has lupus? What about someone who has has cancer?
All right, I'm sorry. I was thinking someone who just always felt that God wasn't answering their prayers. He's beaten up on me. He's never around for me. I must not be good enough.
Well, we have to distinguish between people who are using God as an excuse for their own series of bad decisions and people who, through no fault of their own, are in deep suffering from which there appears to be no end.
All right, so this is suffering, not self-imposed.
No, self-inflicted is another ballgame. Although, interestingly enough, often there's the same questions asked, and interestingly enough, God often has amazing grace for those people as well. So I take people who are self-inflicting as serious and try to help them see where God is even in their self-inflicted suffering.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of self-inflicted suffering, I witnessed something today that I had to take.
We already talked about Chris Roloff once today. We can't talk about him again.
Well, in interest of disclosure, you are his favorite pastor, according to 2 days ago. So don't let him just give you that friend business.
Okay. Don't let him. Now I owe him.
No, but I witnessed something this morning on the ride to work that I had to take a double take at in traffic to see if I was seeing what I was seeing. And I'm coming westbound on Euclid towards the station. About 14th, I see a car stopped in a driveway and some guy laying on the ground with looks like his stuff scattered all over the ground, and his bicycle is laying there. And I'm thinking, well, did the guy get hit? What's going on? And this car, I see the guy jump out of a car And the guy staggers up, and he can barely stand. And the guy hands him what appears to me to be either a 24-pack can or 12-pack bottle of Coors beer.
Wow.
And I'm going, what am I just seeing here? And this guy can barely stand as it is. Is that self-inflicted suffering?
Well, in a lot of ways, about every sin is self-inflicted suffering. We have to be a little bit careful with, especially addictions, because once one gets in the cycle of them, they feel like they own you. And so saying something like, drunk, just get a job, isn't going to get them sober or a job. It'll probably just push them to another bottle. And I would want to put in a whole separate category the notion of addictions, because addictions, they start out where we are the jail keeper and the prisoner, and pretty soon we've thrown the key so far that we can't reach through the prison bars to get the key anymore. And at that point, basically, it's about God intervening to heal people.
Well, what I'm wondering is, what was in the mind of this person who stopped? Did the guy put him up to going in and buying something? What was in the mind of this person who thinks what he was doing was helping the
Richard,
gentleman?
as a pastor, you're supposed to be able to read minds and know this stuff.
Absolutely. Not happening.
What do you mean, what's in his mind, Frank? How do we know what's in his mind?
No, but I'm
just
just
trying to figure out what's in your mind between that 5 inches of your ears. We know what's in there.
As a
Crickets.
pastor, what would be your best guess is what would be in this gentleman's mind that he would immediately jump out and give him a 12-pack of Coors?
Oh, I haven't a clue, honestly. Seriously. I mean, because I could think of a zillion things that could be in his mind. Everything from a close relative who couldn't, let's say the guy was undergoing withdrawal, and those are spectacular symptoms, and if not handled well in a hospital, could kill you. So maybe the guy was thinking he was doing a kindness. I mean, the problem with that is we don't have all the factors, so anything I say is guessing in the blue.
Sure.
Yeah, no, in fact, interesting you bring that up. When I deal with people in pastoral care, I always deal with facts, never motives. Motives are cloudy. Facts I can deal with.
Yeah, I like that. I put something on Facebook today that says, we have a tendency to judge others by their actions, but we judge ourselves by our intentions. So we're always super wonderful because my intentions are so much better than your outcome.
Yes, it just works that way, don't it?
Yeah. 515-244-0077. Would you share? Somebody out there is suffering today. And maybe what you went through, one of the reasons you went through it was for you to share it on the radio so that person listening today can hear that nugget of wisdom that you have for them.
Yep.
God gave you the answer. Can you share it with us? 244-0077. I once heard that one of the worst things you could tell somebody is, I know how you feel.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's not a good answer, is it?
Not a good answer, because no, you don't.
If it's, I know how you feel, I lost my job once too?
Well, it depends. You have to earn the right to walk alongside someone. One of the things I often tell people when they say, what should I do? I said, just remember, Job's 3 friends are great until they open their mouths.
Yeah.
And probably the most healing thing you can do for someone who's suffering is be there.
The most healing thing you could do is simply to be there.
Yep.
Maybe not saying a word.
That's often the best thing.
No cooking casseroles. Just being there.
Yep. Let me give you an example. I was an intern at a congregation as I was studying to be a pastor, and I was assigned to go and deal with a family of a loved one who had just died. I was clueless what to do. I said, what do I do? And he says, just go there. You'll know what to do. So I am there, and I'm making stupid small talk. I'm being awkward the whole thing. I think I have wrecked their lives forever, and have half the family wishing they'd be dead like their beloved just to get rid of me. And I leave, and so I debrief the next week with my intern supervisor, who's the pastor of the church, and he says, well, let's talk about last week. And I'm thinking, oh boy, here we go. And he's going to say, he said, they couldn't stop talking about you. I was like, oh boy. He said, no, just how amazing you were. Well, what did I do? Nothing. You were there. That mattered.
Yeah, it does. And
yeah.
I find that at visitations. I go to a visitation and I obviously address the parties who are suffering, and then I just sit around and I stand around and I'm there. And they'll come back and they'll say, Mac was there for that whole visitation. And I didn't I didn't say anything. I didn't pray with him. I didn't do
have to.
anything. Yeah.
Yep.
Just being there.
Yeah. If people really want words to say, I say, then just say this: I'm praying for you. And that way they don't have to respond. If you go, oh, I'm so sorry, and on and on and on, they just want you to go away at that point.
515-244-0077. Where has God been in the midst of your suffering? Frank, I want you to think of a time that you went through suffering. Can I recommend one?
Sure.
When your mom was in that car accident, and she was in the hospital, and then she was in a home to get her rehabilitated. Now, the good news is now she's home, and she's doing very well. But I saw you suffer. In fact, for a while there, you didn't even come to work.
I didn't have a car. Well, I can think of a worse time that I went through that. She probably suffered more physically than I did. But do you think that God uses suffering in the refining process, the sanctification process, when he is using these tremendous trials to either put something in our life or take something out? And a lot of people want to fight against that instead of submitting.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I think there's a couple things we need to delineate, though. One is I don't believe God ever causes suffering.
Yes, absolutely.
But I think God is brilliant at redeeming it and leveraging it. In fact, I just looked up 2 Corinthians chapter 1, which I think is Paul's summary of how that works. It says this, beginning at verse 3 of chapter 1 of 2 Corinthians, "Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion." Notice how God is described. It's the Father of compassion and the God of all comforts. And that's important because now he's going to talk about human suffering, who comforts us in all our troubles so that, and here's to your point, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves received in God. For just as we share abundantly in the sufferings of Christ, so also our comfort abounds in Christ. And it continues from there.
So in other words, somebody who has walked the path of alcoholism can more readily identify with somebody who is suffering with alcoholism.
And and often knows even when to be tough and when not to be, because they themselves knew when it was helpful and when it was not helpful. A good AA sponsor is worth more than gold.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
My sponsor, I've had one primary and then 3 or 4 guys secondary, and they changed everything for me because I was going to make real stupid decisions, and they changed everything.
Yeah.
And by the way, you don't have to have a quote unquote sponsor if you're not in alcoholism or treatment. You can have a sponsor or a mentor or just somebody you come alongside just in everyday life. Just be there for them. The question is, where was God in the midst of your suffering? Where did you find him in the midst of your personal disasters? I want to hear from you. 244-0077, live today on The Truth on Max World. From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Credit cards are like grandkids. They love you, sometimes get out of control, and it's fun to get a new one. Who can stop them from piling on?
Hi, I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of Des Moines. At the end of the day, you can give these grandkids back, but you're stuck paying off bad credit card debt. We can help you put the fun back into using credit cards responsibly. Right, kids?
Yeah! If you need help getting credit cards off your back, call Consumer Credit of Des Moines.
Hi, I'm J. Michael McCoy, and about 20 years ago, I went to a used car salesman by the name of John Hewitt. He had a little shop over there on North 2nd Avenue called John's Auto Sales, and I bought a car. I found that experience to be one that I had never had before from a used car salesman. He was honest, he was dependable, he had integrity, and he did what he said he was going to do. Well, over the years, between my kids and grandkids, I purchased 7 vehicles from John's Auto Sales. And last month, I asked him to be a sponsor. I can tell you about their huge selection. I can tell you about their years of experience. I can tell you about their honest integrity. But all I really need to tell you is that I bought 7 cars, and you can trust them. John's Auto Sales, 5435 2nd Avenue, Des Moines.
You need a good ride when you hit the trail. Trust the man with the cars, and he goes by the name of Big John. Big John. Big John. From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
If you sit in the back pew or the front pew, it's your voice we want to hear. The phone lines are open, so call 244-0077. Now, here's J. Michael McCoy.
21 minutes after 2 o'clock on this beautiful afternoon. We thank you for listening. This is The Truth, 99.3. My name is Mac McCoy, and the program you're listening to is Mac's World Live. We have one more week that we will be from 2 to 3 in the afternoon. Then beginning November 19th, we will be moving.
October.
Oh, what did I say?
November.
Okay, sorry. October 19th, we will be moving to 3 to 5 in the afternoon. Will be your afternoon drive home. Steve Deace will be back on November 2nd. That's where I got the November. Yeah. He'll be back on November 2nd from 8 to 11 at night. So a new lineup. I'm not sure who's going to be 2 to 3 p.m. yet. I was thinking about a show called Frankly Speaking, but the host is a wacko, so it's not going to work from 2 to 3. Bob Montserrat, the Cat in the Hat, is here along with Frank the Verse Thomas. Ryan is producing today. Dwayne's sitting in, and our special guest is Pastor Richard Webb from Lutheran Church of Hope. And the question is simple. I need you to dig deep for me. Somebody out there is suffering today. Maybe it's accidental they found the radio station. We have a lot of new listeners coming in because 98.3 went to music. And so there are people who are looking for good quality conservative talk, and they're finding us here on 99.3. And there's a brand new person listening, didn't even know they'd ever know this station existed, and they're suffering. Oh, they may not tell you they're suffering. We all wear a facade, but they're suffering. Could be a divorce, could be a relationship breakup, could be angst with a child or a sibling. It could be you lost your job. It's Friday. They gave you a pink slip. They told you to walk. You got 2 weeks and that's it. And you're suffering. And you're mad at God. God, why are you putting me through this? Why? I'm a good person. I come to church. I give money in the jingle box. I pray when I can. I have a devotion. I take communion. I'm a good person. Why are you making me suffer? And a lot of times, Pastor Richard Webb from Hope, we find that in the midst of God's suffering is his greatest blessings and joy.
That's actually true. I went through an illness recently, and in the middle of it, God asked me a question. Do you trust me with you? And I was like, what kind of question is that? And he just pressed it again. Do you trust me with you? And I had to answer, no, I don't. And gulp. And through that, then he began to show up and he actually made himself trustworthy in the middle of the suffering. To when I look back on that illness, I don't think what a horrible time. It's more like, wow, did I learn a ton about God?
Yeah.
And it's not always what people are going to learn, but at least in my unique situation, it was extremely fruitful for me, and he leveraged that illness like nobody's business.
So you don't believe he caused you to be ill?
Nope.
Okay.
In fact, I think that one probably was self-inflicted, where I overworked myself right into it.
All right. So somebody who loses a child or a marriage or a job, God didn't do that to them, did he?
No,
Never.
Never. God is not the author of evil.
Okay. But what he does is he crawls into the middle of our suffering and lifts us up.
In fact, I was just reading in Ephesians 2:10 where it talks about God preparing us, and then in I think it's Psalm 136 where we are fearfully and wonderfully made. Is that the right reference, I think? Well, it says that all our days, before we were even born, he was shaping us. And that word is like a potter in a clay where he gets down into the dirt and he's intimately involved with our lives. Even before we're born, he's intimately involved with our lives. How much more so when bad stuff happens, he gets down in there and says, I'm not going to let that be the last word. I am going to shape that so that it shapes you into the image of my son Jesus. And that is the amazing grace that comes out of suffering, is God won't leave it alone.
2:25 in the afternoon, Pastor Richard Webb from Lutheran Church of Hope is our guest. Frank?
Well, two things here. One, atheists tend to glob on to suffering and use that as an excuse for their atheism, why God didn't do something in their life. But it's this terrible injustice that goes on, that the accuser of the brethren is responsible for our suffering, and it gets blamed on God. Gets blamed on a loving, merciful, tender, pitying God.
Well, I would think the atheist is actually half right. I'm using a half. Martin Luther said something pretty shocking, but I think it's biblical. It's an act of faith to lay the devil at God's doorstep. In other words,
hold on. It's an act of faith to lay the devil
at God's doorstep. Where else? In other words, and this has to do, and this is where the atheist has just a half a point. If God's in charge, why is he allowing this mess? And that's the question that Habakkuk asks. God, our country's falling apart. The powerful are oppressing the powerless. Why don't you fix it? And he says, I will. I'll send the Babylonians. To which Habakkuk says, excuse me, the cure is worse than the illness. And then God reveals his wisdom. But isn't that sometimes our experience, where we wonder who's minding the store? Or as Andy Dillard, who's a Christian theologian, said, what the Sam Hill's going on here?
Now, we don't... So there is no way under the sun that God causes our suffering.
No, he's not going to cause evil. Now, we sometimes confuse evil with unpleasantness.
Okay.
For example, if you go work out, you're going to have sore muscles. And sometimes God puts us in a situation where we need to have a workout. For example, if you pray for patience, he won't give you patience, but he'll put you in situations that cultivate patience. Will they be pleasant?
Ooh.
No.
Ooh, that's good. Yeah, because he really can't give you patience in a situation in which you don't need to be patient.
Yeah, and so he puts us into training. And sometimes we complain that he's pushing us too hard as a good trainer. And usually good trainers, people will complain they push too hard.
Yeah, no pain, no gain.
Pretty well.
Frank?
Well, that text in Hebrew where it talks about separating bone from marrow and the precision in which that has to be done. In other words, God's going to go in with the finest scalpel, better than Ben Carson could think on his best day.
Exactly.
And he's going to separate what is wrong in our life without killing us in the process. Because sometimes this stuff is so malignant that if left to its own devices, it would kill us. So he's going to go in and cut that out and still leave us intact.
And you're talking now about a unique kind of suffering, and that's a bit what I was referring to with the training thing. So I would sort of say there's three kinds of suffering you may experience. One is God's training, and then we're confusing suffering with simply unpleasantness of the work. The second is suffering that's circumstantial, that just comes at us, like the death of a 3-year-old by a drunk hitting him is not God's training.
Right.
And then the third is self-inflicted, such as someone struggling with addiction, which then becomes so big it becomes the prison they're stuck in and the key's too far to reach.
Now, wait a minute. Hold on. I got to step in there.
You betcha.
Yes, there is self-inflicted abuse of alcohol and drugs.
Yep.
But there are also people who have a disease.
Yeah.
All right. And that disease is from alcohol. And basically what we say in recovery is I'm allergic to alcohol.
And actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because it's an important correction that if we don't want to victimize the victim, where we say all alcoholics have willfully made their mess.
Yeah.
You're right. There is genetic evidence that some people have a genetic predisposition to addictive behavior.
Yes. And if you don't agree that alcoholism is genetic and a disease, I'm okay with that. You're somewhere in your personal experience, you've discovered that an uncle, maybe your parent, somebody you care about a lot in your life, you feel chose to pick up that bottle, and they chose to pick up that bottle because they were in a bad situation and they thought they drowned their tears out and their sorrows and their suffering. That may be the case, but science has proven to us since the mid-'70s that alcoholism is genetic and it comes with our bodies that we're born with. Now, some people it never hits. I always tell people I'm a wonderful example. I was raised in a high alcoholic family, meaning white collar, highbrow, et cetera, but there were drinks every night and sometimes too much drinks. Why didn't I start drinking then? It was all around me. I didn't start drinking until I was 34 years old, but something caused something horrible in my life. I couldn't find any other way to fill that empty hole, and so I filled it with alcohol. Eventually, God came in and filled it. But I would argue with someone that you can't just say, "Oh, he drinks because he chooses to drink."
No, I think you're absolutely right, and that's the whole issue, because that's why when I see someone who at least at face value appears to have made their own mess, I still want to ask a bunch of questions before I actually confirm that conclusion. Because, again, there are times when someone is suffering so greatly, self-medication, at least in their eyes, makes sense.
Yeah.
And I've got to be sympathetic to that, even though that may be still a self-destructive behavior. In fact, it could be the circumstantial suffering we've been talking about through no fault of your own. You have chronic pain, or a loved one has been brutally killed.
Yes.
Or they have suffered what appears to be meaninglessly from our perspective. And that causes us to self-medicate because we can hardly handle the pain.
Now, would it be an honest statement to say the following? I used to self-medicate with alcohol. Now I self-medicate with the Bible.
If you do, then you're misusing the Bible. I would not use that kind of language because self-medication, the term, is a technical term for the wrong response to pain.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I could say when I was in the midst of suffering, before I would turn to the bottle. Now when I'm in the midst of suffering, I turn to the Bible.
Makes more sense. Yep.
That would make more sense.
Yep.
Because, I can't speak for anybody else, and you guys have been on this journey with me, Bob, from day one. Actually, you've been there since day one. When I found the Word and it came alive, it didn't take all my suffering away, but I'll tell you what, I don't suffer like I used to. Even in the worst things, I still don't suffer like I used to because I can go to that Word and I can find out instruction.
Yeah.
I know. If I understand it correct, the word Bible means, translate to the Old Greek, means word.
No, it actually means books.
Books. Okay.
Yeah.
I like Bible meaning basic instructions before leaving Earth, and I know that's not it, but that makes sense to me. It's my guide to how I handle things as God would want me to handle them, rather than how I would want to handle them.
Absolutely. And I think there you've sort of raised the issue. What's the proper response to suffering? What I find interesting about it is probably one of the first things the guidebook will tell you is get mad at God. That's against why we had the Luther quote, is that 2/3 of the Psalms are Psalms of complaint. And there are instruction book on how to have a big old fat fight with God. And God loves that because it means we're talking.
Yeah, I want to repeat that, because when I learned that, I think that was fascinating. I probably learned it from you, that when I'm mad at God and I'm talking to him, he loves that relationship because I'm willing to step forward and vent my frustrations to the one that I have the closest relationship with. I like that. Yeah, I like that. Frank?
I've heard it put this way, that God loves digging us out of holes.
Oh, he loves rescuing us anyway. Yep, absolutely. And we often dig our own holes, but he also loves rescuing people who've been thrown in holes.
Well, Jill says on Facebook that nothing pushes us closer to God than suffering.
And C.S. Lewis observed the same thing when he said suffering is God's megaphone. In other words, suffering is a place where all the props are stripped away, all the masks are ripped away, and you're left with you. And that can be a time when God asks very profound questions, and we're finally in the position to listen.
What made you ask him during your illness the question you asked him?
No, he asked me. He
asked you.
He kind of broke in. I was just feeling lousy and wished it would all go away and didn't know what else to do. And God said, "So do you trust me with you now?" And and like I said, "What kind of fool question is that?" "Of course I do." He says, "No, I'm asking it again." I had to finally say, "No, I guess I don't trust you."
So did that raise your trust in him?
Over time, we began a conversation. One is, "What the heck are you doing?" was the first thing I said. Is, "Why are you allowing this mess?"
Yeah.
And then over time, he said, "Well, let's see." And he never gave me an explanation. And this is really important. The Bible never explains suffering. He just started.
We're going to continue the conversation on suffering and where is God in the midst of it. We'll be back on The Truth.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
I'm Brian Leach, owner of Service Legends, and my position is Chief Talent Officer.
I'm Nicholas Wonderscheid.
I am Bernie Hobbs.
And I'm the Service Manager.
Marketing Director and Client Relations Manager.
Everything that we do is about ensuring that we exceed your expectations.
Our clients are important to us. 100% satisfaction.
We're not just focused on heating and cooling. That's the easiest part of our job, actually, is fixing furnaces and air conditioners.
Everyone that we come in touch with, we want to improve lives.
Bottom line is, we've got our installation guarantees, 25% energy savings guarantee, comfort guarantee, temperature selection guarantee, property protection guarantee.
100% satisfaction guaranteed, fixed rate or it's free.
All of those guarantees are backed up with a 100% money-back guarantee to hold ourselves accountable to making sure that you get what you're after.
Just fixing the problem today. If they have another problem 5 days down the road, it's still fixed rate or it's free.
We use what's called straightforward pricing. Our technicians are going to give you an exact to-the-penny price on what it's going to take before they move forward with any repair. That way you know what to expect.
It's the same price every day.
No surprises.
If you get off work at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, you come home, you realize that, oh, my furnace is broken. Now you need to call somebody out that night. You shouldn't have to pay more for that.
We're guaranteeing service 24/7.
We run afternoons, evenings, nights, weekends. We're staffed to work that.
Phone rings at 3 in the morning. You'll get one of our representatives answering the phone every time.
We're not sending you out to Timbuktu in some call center. It's our Service Legend team members, our mission control team.
I'll take a call anytime.
And then they answer the phones the same way during the day as they do at night.
It's a great day at your service company. How can we make you smile?
That's the only way to provide true 24-hour service.
When you're able to let somebody actually live in their home safely when they weren't able to do that before, where they don't have to stay up at night and worry about, is the heat going to come back on? Are we going to freeze the pipes? Is the baby in the room next door going to be sick because they got too cold? When you're able to help somebody overcome challenges like that, that's impacting a life. That makes a difference. I get goosebumps thinking about it.
I love the team. I love the people that I work with.
We have fun, but we work hard.
I call them my ambassadors of legendary service. If you could just envision what that is, that's who we're sending to your home.
They literally will call in, pick up the phone and call and say, hey, I want to talk to your manager. And I get on the phone, they're like, that technician that was at my house was the greatest technician ever. That's cool to me.
We want to brighten people's days.
Every person that we have going into the house has gone through an extensive background check.
Drug testing, we have a very thorough interview process that 1 out of 140 people make it through.
If we promise you something, that's what you're going to get, no matter what.
We're here when you need us to protect the safety and comfort of your family.
If you're not happy, we're gonna make it right.
If we're willing to put 100% money-back guarantee on what we do, what type of work do you think we do?
Give us a call. We're there for you 24/7, 365 days a year.
Enough said.
If you sit in the back pew or the front pew, it's your voice we want to hear. The phone lines are open, so call 244-0077. Now, here's J. Michael McCoy.
All right, 22 minutes before the top of the hour, Salem Radio Network News, and then our good friend Steve Noble has 6 more days, and he's filling in on Afternoon Drive for us. And then starting on October 19th, which is a week from this Monday, Bob and I and Frank and Ryan, we're moving to 3 to 5. I don't know what show's going to be here yet, but there will be probably a national show from 2 to 3, and then we will take you home every day from 3 to 5. We're changing the name of the show back to the name that I used for 20 years, called Max World, M-A-C-S World, and that's because we're going to encompass so many more things in that show, including a highlight on local businesses, a highlight on local not-for-profits, not the big ones, but the local ones, a highlight on some of the news stories. Frank, you'll love this. We're going to talk about the water cooler talk. We're going to talk about what people are, the headlines, what's on the front of the Des Moines Register, what's on the front of USA Today. What did Kevin Cooney tell me this last night at 6 and 10? What did they tell me this morning was going on in our community?
What's he going to do in his retirement?
I hope he comes over here and plays for a while. Kevin and I used to work together. He's a fun guy. I'd love to have him come on the radio with us. But I've only got one. I don't have an open chair, Frank, so don't ask him to come quick. All right, today, Pastor Rich, and if you've never listened to this show before, this is a real transparent show. We don't really take ourselves too seriously. The only thing we take seriously here is the Bible and God's Word. Everything else, we are so fallible. Fallible, is that the right word? We're just so imperfect. And so we don't take ourselves too seriously here. And one of the things we have fun with is we do a lot of kidding around here. And you may tune in for the first time and think, Frank is so mean to Mac. I don't even know why. Mac keeps him around. Well, I keep Frank around because I love him. He's a brother in Christ. And the truth of the matter is, he really, I don't want to say this out loud. Cover your ears, Frank. He knows more about the Bible than a lot of people I know. I mean, he is brilliant when it comes to the Bible. All right, so the reason I have Frank around is because he doesn't drink pop, and I don't like pop. All right, so we're talking about where is God in the midst of your suffering, and I'm asking us all to be a little personal today. I'm waiting for you to call 244-0077. Where did you find God in the midst of the worst times of your life? Divorce, death of a loved one, death of a child, loss of a job. Maybe you suffer from addiction. Maybe you don't know you suffer from addiction, but you're suffering. And you're wondering why God doesn't lift you out of that suffering. Maybe you need to put the bottle down. Maybe you need to put the pills back in the cabinet. Maybe you need to take the pills to the pharmacy and say, I'm misusing these. Take them from me. Get rid of them. By the way, I don't know if you know this. Don't ever throw pills in the garbage. Because people go through the garbage and they'll find those pills and they won't know what they're for and they'll take them. And they could really hurt them. So where is God in the midst of your suffering? Bob, tell me about a time in your life when you were suffering and how you found God in the midst of that.
Well, I mean, I had a number of them, as you know, because of the work that I do.
Yeah, right.
Or did. I still do.
Bob was a forensic scientist for 35 and a half years with the state and traveled all around this world in the midst of terrible disasters like Katrina, 9/11, Flight 232 in Sioux City. And Bob's job was to identify bodies. I can't imagine a worse job than identifying mauled, bloated, just terrible situations of human flesh.
Yeah, and I did that CSI type work for 10 years before United 232 went down.
Wow.
And when that went down, that really impacted me in a huge way. I thought I was immune from experiencing critical incident stress, and that crash proved to me that I was not immune. And so I went through a lot of psychological suffering, not understanding why I was feeling the way I was, wanting to quit my job, wanting to get out of the field because I wasn't tough enough, I wasn't good enough. And I was doing that to myself, and that was not the truth. But because of that suffering in my life, the Lord really directed me into doing the critical incident stress debriefings for other people.
Oh.
And the thing that is really good about it is I have a very good understanding of where people are when they experience trauma because I was there experiencing it, not understanding it. And so by going through it, it gave me a better way to help others. And that's what I've been doing ever since. That was 1989.
So the old adage, if you're feeling bad, depressed, in a bad mood, you're suffering, go out and help somebody else through theirs, and it'll help you through yours.
Well, it does. That's correct. And the thing is, not everybody can reach people that are suffering, depending on what they're suffering with.
All right, let's go to the phones where Army Brad is standing by. Brad, how are you today? And tell me about where you found God in the midst of your suffering.
Well, it's kind of an interesting story. And you were there for me, Mac, and that was a big part of it, and so was Bob. When Megan, my daughter, died, the church and Hope played a tremendous role in helping me through that because the last contact I had with her was during it was the day of the Alpha retreat, and the last thing I sent her on the text was that I loved her, and we were having a moment where they have some silent time, and the pastor that was teaching that day was talking about how you can't just turn to the Bible and find your answers. And that morning when I found out that she had died, I opened up the Bible and to Hosea 6, and for me that helped me so much through that whole situation. And I thought, because the pastor that was speaking is a man that I have great respect for, as a very knowledgeable person with the Bible, and then in my mind at that one moment in my grief, I was like, even those that know so much more about the Bible, still God can prove that what He wants to make us understand, He'll make us understand in His own way.
Yeah, and just if I can add, Megan was tragically killed in a car accident just a few weeks or months before her wedding.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was like a couple months before her wedding on her brother's birthday. So.
Yeah. And all the men of hope, the guys in Men Inspired, we got together and we loved on him. We prayed over him. We laid hands on him, and it was all we could do. It's kind of like you said. We just showed up.
Yeah.
But I've always appreciated Brad sharing that appreciation, because it's kind of what you said. Just be there. Just be there for him. All right, Brad, I appreciate it. Hey, I miss your face. Brad relocated not too long ago to, I don't know, someplace in the South. Arkansas, that's right. But he, because of the web, on Webcast One Live, he can listen and does participate, and he's on our chat every day. So the world is a little smaller because of the internet, isn't it, Brad?
Yes, sir.
And hey, did you hear about our old station blew up and they're playing music now over there?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, so we have all these listeners that are finding our station because they go from 98.3, they push scan, and the next station up the scan is 99.3. So I had a lady at the grocery store last night. I've had people all week long finding this radio station. So God is on the move.
Coincidence?
No. Not at all. I don't think it's any coincidence that less than 90 days after we landed in Des Moines with our full signal that God removed one of our competitors. I didn't do it. Nobody did it. He did it. He wants the gospel proclaimed 24/7 in this community, and he moved us out of the way. It's amazing. All right, buddy. Thanks. I love you. Look forward to seeing you soon.
All right.
Yeah, Frank.
Hey, Richard, do you think that most people can't find God until they're flat on their back and it forces them to look up? Because I've had an incident in my life where, I had to literally pray, God, help me through the next second or I will perish. We get up sometimes and pray, oh, Lord, help me this day. I was literally to a point in my life where I was praying for the next second.
I think that, and again, this is helpful from the recovery community. I think some people have high bottoms and some people have low bottoms. I've heard stories of people who everything was fine, and then just God broke in and changed everything. I also know I've heard several stories like what you just said, that some people had to get flat on their back before God had their attention.
Yeah.
I think God uses every circumstance to reveal Himself and His love, and knows exactly how and what we need.
All right, 10 minutes for the top of the hour. Salem Radio Network News is coming up. We're coming back. It's your voice I want to hear. How did you find God in the midst of your suffering?
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Credit cards are like grandkids. They love you, sometimes get out of control, and it's fun to get a new one. Who can stop them from piling on?
Hi, I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of Des Moines. At the end of the day, you can return the grandkids, but you're stuck paying off bad credit card debt. We'll help you put the fun back into using credit cards responsibly. Right, kids?
Yeah! If you need help getting credit cards off your back, call Consumer Credit of Des Moines.
Hi, I'm J. Michael McCoy, and about 20 years ago, I went to a used car salesman by the name of John Hewitt. He had a little shop over there on North 2nd Avenue called John's Auto Sales, and I bought a car. I found that experience to be one that I had never had before from a used car salesman. He was honest, he was dependable, he had integrity, and he did what he said he was going to do. Well, over the years, between my kids and grandkids, I purchased 7 vehicles from John's Auto Sales. And last month, I asked him to be a sponsor. I can tell you about their huge selection. I can tell you about their years of experience. I can tell you about their honest integrity. But all I really need to tell you is that I bought 7 cars, and you can trust them. John's Auto Sales, 5435 2nd Avenue, Des Moines.
You need a good ride when you hit the trail. Trust the man with the cars, and he goes by the name of Big John. Big John. Big John.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
If you sit in the back pew or the front pew, it's your voice we want to hear. The phone lines are open, so call 244-0077. Now, here's J. Michael McCoy.
All right, 10 minutes for the top of the hour, Salem Radio Network News, and then we have 6 more days of Steve Noble. Man, I don't know if you're listening, Steve, but it has been such a joy to listen to you. You're so good. I love your heart. You know how to proclaim the gospel and not shove it down somebody's throat. I've learned from you, Steve, and I appreciate you being here. On October 19th, Bob and I and Frank and Ryan will all move to 3 to 5 in the afternoon, and we'll be your new afternoon drive team. That's a permanent move. It's not a temporary move. It's a permanent move. The show will be rebranded as Max World, which was the show that I did for years and years here in the market. And the reason we're changing from the View from a Pew to Max World, we're going to cover more local things. So it's not always just going to be from a pastor or a pulpit. We're going to do more local news stories. We're going to bring in some really good Christian business people and share their business with you because they're people who are supporting this radio station. I don't know if you ever noticed, but we don't ask for money. We don't have a private club you can sign up for $9.95 a month and get all the webcasts. We don't have a book that we sell, and if you bring it to us, we don't do that on this network on the local basis. The national preachers obviously always ask for your donations. We don't do that. And so what we do is we sell, just like any other radio station, our advertising time. And those folks that buy this advertising time, they need you to respond to them. Whatever commercials you're about to hear when this program's over or in the middle of the next hour, please respond to those. And I'm not saying you have to buy anything there. That's up to you, man. That's your decision. But if you hear an ad from Service Legends, I hope sometime you write Brian Leach a letter over at Service Legends and say thanks for being there. Thanks for being a tent maker, a supporter, an underwriter of the truth. Because quite frankly, the number one thing in our life is God. And the number two thing is our listeners. And the number three things is our supporters, our tent makers. They're the ones that make this happen. Pastor Richard Webb is my guest today. Now, I want to go back on some notes that I took. You said there are 3 kinds of suffering. Did I get that right? 1 is God's training. Mm-hmm. 2 is circumstantial. Mm-hmm. And 3 is self-afflicted.
Right.
So those were the 3 kinds of suffering. Mm-hmm. All right. And God never, ever, ever, ever makes us suffer.
No, he never sends. A better way to put it is God never sends evil.
Okay, and suffering usually consists of something evil has happened.
Often, yeah.
Lost a job, lost a sibling, lost a parent, mm-hmm. A marriage. God is on the move in so many ways in this country, mm-hmm. but the devil is also working pretty good to attack people right now.
Oh, absolutely, and has been ever since we walked away from God's grace in the garden.
And so what we're trying to help you do today is understand how to help people that are suffering. And the worst thing I've always heard you can do is say, oh, I've been there. I know what you're going through. No, you don't. and quite frankly, if the person is edgy in their emotions, they'll probably look at you and say, you have no idea what I'm going through. But as Richards has stated, the best thing you can do is just show up. Sit quietly. Just be there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you told a story about how you came alongside of a family that had lost a loved one, and you just showed up at the service or wherever it was.
Yeah, it was a scared intern pastor, didn't know what to say, so I just kind of bumbled my way through it. And what they remembered is I showed up. They hadn't a clue what I said.
Yeah. Frank?
So while God does not bring suffering, mm-hmm. He uses suffering.
Oh, massively. In fact, He can turn either the self-inflicted suffering or the circumstantial suffering into training. Because He loves us so much, He doesn't want that to be empty time. And often He sends us into brand new directions, deepens our character, all sorts of amazing things He can do so that it's not just this sort of nasty piece of evil we've survived.
And He potentially can be softening other individuals' hearts by witnessing our personal suffering.
Oh, absolutely. Again, what we saw in 2 Corinthians chapter 1, it's amazing because then literally you don't have to go up to someone and say, I know what you're going through, but because you do, you know better how to come alongside. Hence the fact that you can deal with people who've gone through traumatic stuff and you know how to be there with them with some precision that someone else wouldn't have a clue to do.
Yeah, and again, let's emphasize it's not our words.
Nope.
It may be words from the Bible, but it also may just be God saying, shh, just be there. Just be there for him.
Yeah. In fact, I'll tell you a story. There's another thing other than I know what you're going through. The other thing, do not ever say is, it was God's will.
Oh, yeah.
And I have, because it may be, but you don't know.
How about the line, well, they're in a better place now?
Oh, gosh. Or God wanted a little angel. I mean, I want to tell you a story about what happened. My professor told us in our pastoral care course, there was a senior who came up to him and says, I think I need to drop out of seminary. And the professor said, why? And he said, well, my son died of sudden infant death syndrome. And we were having the viewing, and the pastor, well-meaning, came up to me and said, son, this is God's will. And without even thinking, I decked him. And he said, that's why I need to leave seminary. I hit somebody. And the prof said, son, for that, you get an A.
Yeah, right. Frank?
My daughter's principal in grade school, son, was killed on a transporting back and forth to college over at Union College in Lincoln, Nebraska. And my daughter had almost been killed on 14th and Watrous in a severe automobile accident. So at their funeral, I walked up to the husband and I shook his hand and I said, I almost know how you feel. And I especially used the word almost. And he says, yeah, you were halfway there.
Yeah. And again, God will use our pain. He will leverage it and redeem it so that we can be the presence of God to someone else.
All right, as we get ready to close this show, we've learned that, A, don't say, I know where you're at, I've been there. Don't say, God got a new little angel when somebody dies. Don't say, well, at least we know where he's going. The most important thing you can say is nothing. Just be there for them. When you were going through your illness this last year, how were you aware that so many people were praying for you?
A lot of it was just a spiritual sense, but the people who did show up, they just walked with me. And many of them had actually walked through the same thing I had, so I could talk about it.
Yeah.
And we weren't being careful with each other. But they didn't initiate. They let me open the door.
Yeah, that's the way to do it. All right, Richard, as always, thank you for being here. You're always welcome. Ryan, thanks for producing today. It's always your voice we want to hear. Put our phone number, our studio number, in your phone, in your data bank, 515-244-0077. It's your voice we want to hear. Bob, thanks for being here this week. You've got a weekend full of horse stuff, I would imagine. Bob bought a horse farm a year ago.
Ooh, way cool.
Thought he would be retiring. Now he puts in more hours at the horse farm than anybody else. And Frank, thanks for being here this week. Appreciate you. One more week with Steve Noble this afternoon and then next week. And then starting on October 19th, this show changes brands back to Max World Live. And we will be 3 to 5 in the afternoon, and looking forward to spending the rest of my life. This is the last thing I'm going to do. I told God I wanted to end well, and I thought that would be 100 different things, and I never dreamed it would be sitting on the radio with you every afternoon, sharing his love and his strength and his grace. And I appreciate, you have no idea how much, what a blessing you are that you listen to this show. All right, this weekend, do me a favor, think of somebody you need to forgive. I know you don't want to. It's tough. Man, they really deserve what they're getting, but you need to forgive them, because as you forgive, you shall be forgiven. I'll see you in church.